Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friday Health Talk of the Week. We're so excited to be here with you guys. It is cold outside, and so I hope that you guys are somewhere warm and you guys can relax and put your feet up and just kind of enjoy, this time together today. We like to educate, entertain, hopefully a little bit, and inspire. So today we're talking about Alzheimer's. I'm going to bring our illustrious host, Dr. Roberson, up in just 1 second. It's gonna be movie time for a moment, kids. Okay, so just hang out for just a minute with us. We're gonna watch a couple short videos. Videos are awesome. We got folks logging in. Don't go anywhere, please. Just give us 55 minutes of your time. Call somebody, text them, share this. They need to hear about this. All of us are going through these health issues together, and so this show is so important. You better tell somebody. And while we're watching all the other shows, no shade to them, but we'll spend time watching some of the celebrity gossip shows and things like that that'll remain nameless. I won't talk about those right now, but you need to be watching this because those shows are not going to save your life, and this one just might. So having said all that, we're learning about Alzheimer's today. Hang on, we're going to watch about 3 or 4 minutes of video, and then I'm going to bring on our wonderful host who is going to introduce what our topic is and what we're doing, and then also we're going to bring our phenomenal guest on. Today we are talking about Alzheimer's and what you ought to know. Now, also, you can hit us in the chat box if you have a question, comment, or concern. Please do so. Our audience is never quiet and never scared, so I don't expect you guys to be quiet or scared today. All right, here's a short video on Alzheimer's. Here we go.
While we do not fully understand what causes Alzheimer's disease, researchers have shed considerable light on how the disease progresses. It's been more than 100 years since Dr. Alois Alzheimer first described the insidious but devastating changes experienced by his now famous patient, Auguste Detta. She had suffered from progressive loss of memory and personality changes.
Examining their brains posthumously, Dr. Alzheimer identified abnormal microscopic deposits, which he called plaques and tangles because of their strange appearance. We now know that these are made up of abnormally folded proteins. Plaques are made up of a protein called beta amyloid, while tangles contain another protein called tau.
At first, the plaques and tangles don't have a significant impact on brain function. As their numbers increase, we believe they begin to interfere with how brain cells communicate with each other. This is typically when we see the first signs of Alzheimer's disease. As the disease progresses, these abnormal accumulations cause millions of brain cells to die, which can be seen as shrinkage on CT or MRI scans.
Sometimes a lot of changes, there'd be a lot of changes, and other times they'd just be subtle and slow.
Plaques and tangles do not accumulate in a random fashion. In fact, their gradual appearance in different parts of the brain occurs in a very organized or orderly sequence. The very first plaques and tangles appear in the temporal lobes, located just behind the eyes, which is the part of the brain responsible for memory. One of the earliest signs of Alzheimer's disease is loss of recent memories.
People can say, oh, well, you lose your memory, so maybe that'll make it easier, but it didn't make it easier. It was just always a fear of what he should do, what was going to happen next, where he was.
As the disease progresses, the plaques and tangles spread to involve other brain areas. When this occurs, other cognitive functions are affected, including language, following involvement of the left frontal lobe, planning and judgment when the frontal lobes are affected, and visual spatial abilities when the parietal lobes are damaged.
The ability to successfully complete.
Good afternoon and happy Friday, everyone. Wasn't that a great video? I am Dr. Tonya Roberson, the chair of the Far South Chicago Coalition's Health and Mental Wellness Committee, and your host for our Friday Health Talk of the Week. The Far South Chicago Coalition is comprised of caring community leaders, business owners, and engaged residents working together to make a change and to create a thriving community. I am happy to announce that with your help, the Far South Chicago Coalition has created 9 key focus areas that has helped us create the amazing Far South Chicago Quality of Life Plan. Remember, we are one band and one sound, and we deserve the best. Thanks for joining our show today, where we will have a conversation around the basics of Alzheimer's disease and dementia and why it's called the family disease. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of a group of brain cells and diseases called dementia. Alzheimer's disease destroys brain cells, causing problems with memory, thinking, and behavior, and can be severe enough to affect work, long life hobbies, and social life. It is the 5th leading cause of death for those aged 65 years and older. The demands of caregiving can also limit the caregiver's ability to take care of themselves. Family caregivers of people with Alzheimer's and related dementias are at greater risk for anxiety, depression, and poor quality of life than caregivers of people with other conditions. So now I'll turn it over back to Ted so he can introduce our great guest. Hope you enjoy the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roberson. But before we introduce our guest, I got another video, folks, because that's what we do around here. We educate. And Dr. Roberson has pulled together this phenomenal panel. I can tell you guys, I see even from the comments, someone just commented, wow, that's how I feel. I feel like, wow, like how do we not know this information? And so once again, we're going to hop into this. Now, because the Far South Chicago Coalition serves a community that is heavily Black and brown, we are going to talk about how this community affects the African American community, particularly how this issue. And so we're going to watch a short video, and then we're going to introduce our guest in just one moment. So hang on. More information for you right now.
But before Alzheimer's disease can take your life, it steals your memories.
And research shows African Americans have a greater risk. New this morning, 24-hour News 8's Marvis Herring learned from the experts that there are ways to make yourself less vulnerable. Good morning, Marvis.
Good morning, Teresa and Casey. Diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease, they all tend to affect the Black community more than others. But knowing your status and family's history when it comes to those conditions, it could be life-changing.
Dad, I loved you.
Michelle Battle's encounter with brain disease has been painful. Complications from her dad's dementia took his life in late December.
I done the best that I could with what I had.
And her mom's been battling Alzheimer's for 7 years.
It was like, how is that possible? Both parents?
The Grand Rapids native recalled the unforgettable memories of her father, Louis Edward Battle Sr., before his diagnosis.
He was a salesman, and he can pretty much sell you anything.
Known as a sharp dresser, it never surprised Michelle to catch her dad grabbing his second or third shower of the day. That changed as his memory became cloudy.
He would be like, well, I took a shower. And it's like, no, that was a couple of days ago, so that I knew my dad, that was not my dad.
Dementia is an umbrella term.
The Greater Michigan chapter of the Alzheimer's Association explained that out of more than 85 types of dementia, Alzheimer's affects the most people. Vascular dementia ranks second.
And that's where a lot of the African American population falls into that category because of the untreated heart issues.
Guidance from the Alzheimer's Association and care resources were game changers for Michelle. They offered support groups and advice for new caregivers and explained how her parents may have become more susceptible to mental impairment.
They both have diabetes, high blood pressure, heart problems, and those are statistics that relate to dementia.
Education is going to be the key.
Michelle joined the Alzheimer's Association's efforts to educate the local Black community, hoping to save a life by sharing her personal story. But she said her dad's 2009 diagnosis was no mistake.
I didn't have my dad when I was a little girl, so it was just God that gave him back to me for 7 years for us to bond, and I would cherish every moment of that.
And Michelle says she wants the local African American community to know that it's okay to ask more questions about dementia, and the local Alzheimer's Association feels the same. They're hosting an event this week. It's tomorrow night at St. Luke AME Zion Church. It's in Grand Rapids.
It's on Delaware, and it's called The Basics of Alzheimer's Disease. And really, there's a lot.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for hanging out with us. This is a pretty serious conversation. And so I want to introduce our guests because we believe in bringing experts to the table, which I think is also very different about our show. I've done a number of shows like this, and I'm always impressed by the people that we have on. These are not just folks with opinions, but they are really folks who are experts in their fields. And so I am so grateful to have these medical experts here. The first person I want to introduce is Dr. Wendy Chen. She's a geriatric fellow at the University of Chicago Medicine. She has an interest in frailty, mobility, and improving the healthcare experience of LGBTQ plus individuals. Dr. Tiffany Jamison is an assistant professor of nursing at Governors State University and a board certified family nurse practitioner with full practice authority. Thank you both for being here. We are so excited to have you to help guide our discussions on this issue. So, as Dr. Roberson talked about in the opening, it is the fifth leading cause of death. There are over 6 million Americans of all ages who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Can you guys give me a little information about the prevalence of the disease and how it works? Either one of you can answer that.
Dr. Wendy, you can start. Okay.
Okay. I'll start, and then you can fill in all the blanks. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. And yes, I have a passion for, helping and supporting older adults. I think that they have some unique issues, and something exactly like Alzheimer's and dementia is something that we have a lot of work to get done. So a little bit about dementia. First, let's define it a little bit. It is basically a term about not being able to remember, think, speak, make decisions that affect everyday activities. And then Alzheimer's is the most common type of dementia. We say that it's probably somewhere between 60 and 80% of those diagnosed with dementia. And then talking kind of broadly about dementia, we say that it affects, like you said, about 6 million Americans right now. That's our estimate. I think that maybe it might be a little low because there's so many that have, they have memory loss, or they may actually have dementia, but they're like, oh, I'm just getting old. It's no problem, when they actually might have something a little more serious. And then there's an estimate of about 30 million worldwide.
So my question for you is, and thank you for that. By the way, before I forget to say this, on a personal level, I just noticed that you're at U of C in geriatrics, and my aunt is at U of C in geriatrics, Shelley Williams.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you work with her. But
She's
please
my
tell her.
attending. I work with her, yes.
Well, please send her my love. This is her nephew Ted, or we call me Teddy in the family.
Okay, very good.
Send her my love and tell her to call me sometime.
I will do that.
But anyway, so Alzheimer's, you mentioned two things, and Dr. Jamison, maybe you can talk about this as well. So Alzheimer's affects people that are not just older, was one of the things that I picked up on. And the other thing you mentioned, Dr. Chen she mentioned the idea that this was the most common form of dementia. Can either of you talk about other forms of dementia that people might not be aware of?
Yeah. Well, going to hit on your age point, B. Smith, as everyone knows, she was a famous chef, African-American chef, very well known. She was diagnosed in her late 40s, early 50s. And I actually work in memory care. So my specialty just happens to be dementia patients. It may be traumatic brain injury. It may be Alzheimer's. So it's just a variation. So I have patients sometimes as young as 50 and up to 103. So my grandfather actually was diagnosed. So I know firsthand the diagnosis process was for him. He started right around 93. We started seeing some changes. Well, that's relatively old, but for him, he was a very active young man. He was young for us. He was very active. It took about 2 years for us to really start seeing the significant changes. So right around 95 or 96 is when we said, something has really changed significantly. So he was on the back end of the spectrum, but I actually have a patient now that I'm dealing with and treating who is about 64. So you will see a broad range. However, you generally see it 65 and up. And it can range from the symptoms, the stages going from the late stages. It may take 2 years to 20 years. So it just kind of depends on the process for that particular individual, because it's going to be different. There's no cookie cutter process as it relates to the staging. Some jump from late to middle stages very quickly, but then you may have those who slowly progress from late to middle to, from early to middle to late stages. So it may be 20 years for some. It just depends on the dynamics. But one of the things I wanted to hit back on in the news, one of the videos, they talked about factors in the African American community. And one of the things I know we oftentimes just kind of don't think about when we think about the health side, but the environment. So environmental pollutants also can play a factor in this diagnosis. So I always think back to, and those of you all that are from the South Side, right around 130th, there is a landfill, right? There is a landfill, and all the pollutants for as long as I've been, and I won't say my age, as long as I've been here for many decades, I
30, right? 25,
right,
30, right?
32. I always felt like that landfill could have a negative impact in the community on the South Side, and which was Argyle Gardens, right? And so I had family who lived in that area as well. And lo and behold, certain things like that began to affect them. So it may have been a neurological disorder where MS started popping up. We start seeing trends of people with MS. Dementia was starting to be, so Alzheimer's was beginning to be an issue. So I just wanted to reiterate, it's not just hypertension, obesity, cardiac, it also can be environmental pollutants of that magnitude.
I really appreciate you sharing that. So obviously the Far South Chicago Coalition works in that area, is very familiar with it, very familiar with the environmental pollutants. I'm sure Dr. Roberson could talk about that when she comes on to close us out. I ran for alderman in the 9th Ward, which is there, campaigned in Argyle Gardens, heard the countless stories of people in that community who, had cancer and various diseases. And
Yes.
I lived not even 5 minutes from Argyle Gardens for a number of years in my life, and could smell what was coming off of that landfill, so much so that I wanted to get my family away. But I understand that, and I am angered by the conversation because it is the truth. And I think that oftentimes around health issues, people like to try to blame sort of the victim. Well, if you had eaten better, if you had taken better care of yourself, that sort of thing. And those things do help, and that's true. But there are real environmental factors that we've got major disparities, and we need to be talking about that as well. So thank you so much for bringing that up. So why don't you all talk a little about I hate to go into this, but we kind of need to, sort of a little about the progression of the disease a little bit, and what people can do to recognize it. Once again, go a little further into the deeper types, that sort of thing. And then what we can, let's just start there. What the progression of the degree is, what people can do. I got lots of questions, so let me slow down here. Okay. I was.
Do you want to start with this one, and then I'll take?
Yeah, let's just start with that one. But I'm going to keep firing them off. So just I was watching the press conference with Joe Biden's press secretary yesterday, and this woman asked a question, and the press secretary just let her have it. She was like, "This is a ridiculous question," that sort of thing. So hopefully you guys will be nicer to me with my random questions, but I am going to keep on fighting and keep on pushing. So please, Dr. Chen, if you want to take that first, that'd be great.
Okay, sure. I think, first, the first thing we should talk about is that make sure you actually get the diagnosis, because sometimes memory loss is not dementia. And so just making sure that we're actually dealing with dementia and that's kind of one of the steps. And then one of the things that we commonly don't do is we don't commonly delineate the different types of dementia. And so that's one of the reasons why we don't know. We don't know if, a particular either ethnic group or area has a higher amount of different types of dementia. We don't really have that data yet. And I think that would be really interesting and important to document that. One of the things that I've heard, kind of anecdotally, but also people who are doing the research, is that there seems to be more vascular dementia here in the south side of Chicago. And, you know, why is that? And there's a lot of questions about, well, is it because we have poor vascular health? And that can be part of that. So I think that's really important. And then talking about kind of the progression of disease, when we talk about it, we often talk about Alzheimer's just because that's the kind of, usually when we're talking about dementia, we're talking about Alzheimer's, and some people use it interchangeably. But to be clear, when we talk about the stages, we're usually talking specifically about Alzheimer's. And we usually think of it as previously discussed, as kind of middle, and then of mild or early, moderate or middle, and then severe or late. And so usually we say the mild or early is 1 to 3 years. Many times people actually don't get diagnosed during that time. Like I said, people say, oh, you know, I'm just getting older. Oh, it's, you know, it's nothing, even though they might be missing some kind of important things. It's just kind of brushed off. And then people don't often, certainly for me, coming into my clinic, it tends to be family dragging in someone saying there's something wrong with my loved one, and they're already in the moderate to middle stage of Alzheimer's dementia. And that can go anywhere from 2 to 9 years, sometimes even more, especially if there's a lot of great interventions. And then severe and late, we usually see that 1 to 3 years. And that's when we're needing a lot of help. Somebody's not able to care for themselves pretty much at all. They may even be nonverbal. In other words, they're not really able to say words. And so that's usually when we're kind of calling in the troops and getting a lot of help in for that.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Dr. Jamison, so what can we do, right? If we want to, and I've got a couple questions in the chat box, so I'm going to come to those in a second, but if you have more of those you guys are watching, please go ahead and throw them out. This is not one of those shows where I'm not going to be responsive if I see your question come up, unless it's just off the wall, which you won't ask me that kind of stuff because you guys are a great audience. We will definitely go ahead and answer those questions. But Dr. Jamison, can you tell us, so we see kind of, I really appreciate Dr. Chen sort of breakdown of mild, severe, and the years and that sort of thing. What can someone do to prevent being in this situation where they would experience this kind of cognitive loss?
So, you know, and Dr. Chen said something, oftentimes because of the timing of the diagnosis, a lot of times our seniors will say, oh, I'm just getting forgetful. This is not just a quote unquote forgetfulness or age related. It's not because I'm getting older, I'm having memory loss. Memory loss is not something that you should be experiencing, right? Just because you're getting older. So when we think about the early stages, one of the things that you have to look at is, okay, what symptoms are they exhibiting, right? So one of the first things I can just say with my grandfather, once we start seeing the changes, the first thing we thought was, okay, you know what, let's talk with this primary care provider. When we did that, we had looked at the fact that, yes, he had hypertension, but he had no other health issues. So obviously when we're thinking about prevention, some things are genetic, right? So that means they're going to come through the bloodline. But we know things such as, once again, not living in environments where there may be more toxic things manifesting, trying to make sure we have good cardiac health, making sure that we stay within our proper weight and things of that magnitude. All those things can be measures that you can implement. But in some cases, it's hereditary, right? So I have another family member who has it. And so, you know, the father and the son. So it may be genetic. So there is one of the things where you can just kind of think about prevention is, okay, let me just make sure that I'm taking care of my health overall. That's not just with, dementia. That's just so that you can live a long life, right? Hopefully a long, prosperous life. But in thinking about that, I would say following up on a consistent basis, getting the necessary blood work and things of that magnitude. Oftentimes in our community, let's just be honest, we know that we may go a year or two without even having our annual physical, right? We may not get that annual blood work like we should. We may not have, and we know there are many reasons why. The disparity is real, right? So therefore, it may be the lack of transportation, the lack of finances, the lack of insurance. But in relation to prevention, I would say just making sure that you are following up consistently with your primary care provider, making sure that if you are on medication, that you're taking your medication for your cardiac issues. Because once again, those all play factors: the cardiac, the hypertension, the obesity, heart disease, right? Stroke. So we have to take care of our overall health, which can help in the prevention of not only, once again, dementia, but all of these issues that can manifest. Also, one of the questions, that kind of came into mind was, who should you see if you feel like this is an issue? And so you start off with your primary care provider, of course, and then you will be referred to a neurologist. And then that's when the testing comes in. But when we're thinking about early stages, as Dr. Chen talked about, the early stage or the beginning phases, you're just kind of seeing those memory loss. Some of the cognitive difficulties are starting to appear, but you really need to immediately say, hey, let me not just blow this off. Let me go get checked out. Let me be proactive. Because what we tend to do is be reactive. And so if you're proactive, you're giving yourself an opportunity to maybe beat this or prolong the severe symptoms. Because hence, as Dr. Chen talked about, you can start medication management, routines can change, safety factors play into this as well. So family members may be able to hone in and identify the best strategies once sitting down and doing maybe a family conference with the primary care doctor and the neurologist if there's a definitive diagnosis. So I think it's many things that can be done. However, I think prevention definitely still starts with following up, taking care of your overall health, and then going from there.
So thank you for that. When you talk about taking care of our health, and I'm going to come to these questions in just one second, but I've read that there are certain types of dementia that are potentially reversible, that we can do, that there are things that we can do to kind of either slow the process down, or can you guys speak to that? Because you talked a lot about sort of what we could do to prevent it. But what could we do if we're in that situation? What can we be doing potentially even to lessen the impact of the disease?
Yeah, I
And I'm sorry,
don't really know about reversing it, but certainly there's some things out there we can do that has been shown to slow the progression down or keep us kind of even keel and keep us kind of where we are for a decent amount of time. And along with all the things that was previously said about, just working on our bodies and keeping them healthy is engagement. There's a really interesting study that was done, it's probably a long time ago now, but it was done on a very large group of nuns. And they did that, and they looked at their health, documented them, and it was a really great, because it's not very common that you can do really good control groups, but you can, because they're
because they're nuns and they're in their
very strict area, environment, food together. So it was a very interesting, and one of the things they looked at was who got dementia, like who had those really difficult problems towards the end of life. And interestingly enough, they saw that those who did not get memory problems, dementia, that sort of thing, were those who were engaged. So the nuns that were 80 years old and learning a new language, and, that were really engaged in the community. And then the ones who were kind of kept to themselves, may have been in a smaller, a smaller group of people, kind of withdrawn, maybe had started to lose some hearing or vision loss and hadn't gotten them corrected, that they tended to do pretty poorly and go and kind of, we call it dropping off a cliff. They're doing okay. Maybe they're going kind of down a little bit, and all of a sudden they just can't function anymore. Those were the ones that tend to do worse. And we see that, or I certainly see that in practice as well. The more engaged people are, the more they're trying to use their brain, learn new things, be engaged with others, the better they tend to do.
Wow.
And I agree.
Thank you.
That's really relative. And I'm glad you said that, because what you'll see is now that more families are understanding the progression of Alzheimer's and dementia, that is why, at one point in time, a lot of times we wanted to be caregivers at home. Or we're going to keep our loved one in-house because we want to manage everything right there because it's a familiar environment. But then you start seeing more families saying, hey, my senior, my grandfather, my dad, or my uncle or my aunt need to have certain levels of interaction and engagement with other seniors. So hence the assisted living community start popping up, the memory care start popping up because of that very reason. When you can keep, like Dr. Chen said, when you can keep that engagement and that interaction with other seniors and other people, that helps a whole lot, hence adult daycare. So when you think about Alzheimer's and dementia overall, that is why you see families also send their loved ones. So they're not just sitting in the house declining rapidly. They're sending them out and saying, hey, we're going to participate in adult daycare, or, we're going to start engaging in some exercise at the gym. Hence walking around the gym, walking around the mall, doing the puzzles as a group of seniors or adults, things of that magnitude. So you see that for that reason, it will help stimulate the mind, in addition to, obviously, to medications and things that can slow down the progression. But that was a very valid point in relation to engagement. I just think that helps with a lot of things. But when you're thinking about cognitive issues, it is very important.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, let's hit these comments in the comment section. So we got Juliet Bramlett. If I ever mess your names up, by the way, please just send me a little nice, don't be mean. Just go like, hey, mister, could you please, you could spell it out, sound it out phonetically or whatever you want for me to do so. But I think I got it. Juliet Bramlett says, what are proven methods of getting persons to get to a physician for an initial analysis? She said, I have two individuals that I would like to effectively encourage in order for them to get help as prescribed by professionals.
Oh, wow. Well, I would say, if they are, and Dr. Chen, you can jump in on this one too, but I would say, do they have a primary care provider? Are they following up with their doctor regularly? If they have a relationship with their physician or nurse practitioner or PA, then you need to be reaching out to them and saying, hey, I'm seeing some changes. I'm concerned about some things. And once again, not put it on the back burner, because it's not something you just want to wait for it to progress. You want to try to get it addressed. If there's something pertinent that you're seeing, or there's something that is triggering you to think that there is some type of memory issue happening, you want to get it addressed as soon as possible. So hence saying, let me follow with my primary care provider. And then once again, they will say, okay, you know what, I'm seeing some things after they run some tests and some labs and some analysis, then they will refer you to the neurologist for some more testing and for that definitive diagnosis.
Fantastic. Did you want to pop in on that, Dr. Chen, or?
Sure. I have seen very creative ways to get people to the doctor.
Okay.
Have come to this
please do
right
share.
Here.
Please do share.
I would tell you, in my opinion, the best way, as in the ones that have the best outcome, is to just have a frank discussion with them and say, I'm worried about you. Let's get it checked out and just find out. Because there's certain people who, want to avoid the medical system altogether. There's some people who just don't want to go to the doctor. And then I also have some who, it's in the family and they're scared to know. And like I said, the best thing is knowledge. Well, what if it's not dementia? Maybe it's something that, like you said, is reversible, that we can just take care of. And why don't let it get so bad that we can't. So I think that just encouraging people to be open, and I'm worried about you. I want you to be worried about you. I want you to be around. I care about you. And just kind of having that frank discussion and coming in with that. That being said, I have had a couple people that were dragged here unbeknownst to them about memory issues. And it does take some time to calm them down and be able to kind of talk to them. Thankfully, I've been able to help those people that have come in. There were some pretty worried families, and just having that conversation, like, we care about you, and this is something we're trying to help you with, to try and work on that.
Wow. We got a question here. Is it safe to say that the reason African Americans tend to get dementia more than other races is because of the high prevalence of chronic diseases such as diabetes, high blood pressure, strokes, high cholesterol that exist in these communities?
I would say it definitely plays a factor. As we know, once again, cardiovascular diseases are one of the factors, right? So, and the sad part is, in our community, in African American communities, we do see a high prevalence of hypertension, type 2 diabetes, obesity, stroke, so high cholesterol. So our level of prevention and response to disease processes is not always quick, right? We sometimes are a little slow to move on things, or we will kind of look for, we tend to be a very spiritual set of people, right? So sometimes we will, instead of taking the medication, say, you know what, maybe I'll do diet and exercise, but I'm going to pray about it, which is nothing wrong with prayer. I believe in prayer. However, we also have to say, you know what, God made those doctors and those nurse practitioners, and you know what, I may want to take my medication. So you will see people put off taking medications and things, looking for other ways to heal. Not saying that healing can't take place. However, once again, sometimes you actually have to take that medication to bring that cholesterol down, especially if you're eating cake, cookies, and pies every day. So you can't wait for prayer to work if you're not doing your
Dr. Jamison, you did not go there. You did not. Did you say cake, cookies, and pies at the church picnic? Is that what you said, Dr. Jamison? You did not say that.
I'm just saying. So
I know Dr. Roberson has done some research around these issues of health in the faith community. So I hope when she comes back, she can talk about this. This is of interest to me. Actually, I'm involved in ministry. I do all kinds of stuff. So I understand that dynamic very well. So she said cake, cookies, and pie, everyone. So maybe you can have the cake and the cookies, but okay, all right, in moderation.
Okay. I would just like to just to slip in there. We actually don't have any really firm, great data on it, and I think that it's an area that we need the data. We need the research. We need to find out. It's definitely been speculated that that's true. Again, like was said, that we tend to see more dementia in places that are underserved, with difficulty accessing the medical system. So it's definitely something that we are concerned about, but we actually don't have great data on if cause and effect. We don't have that, but I think that that's definitely something that a lot of people are working on. And so I'm hopeful that we will soon be able to at least have some knowledge on that soon.
Yes. In terms of ethnicity. I agree.
Yeah.
In terms of ethnicity.
Because I'm telling you, I'm interested in just, in culture, religion. I'm all across the board, right? I would imagine that depending on whatever sort of ethnic group, cultural group, that there are differences in how people approach healthcare based on their spiritual beliefs. I'd be very interested. I think, once again, Dr. Roberson has done some of this, and I just am really interested, particularly in the question of how religion impacts people's behavior. And I hadn't thought about health as much. I think more about politics and things like that, but I would really be interested in that conversation. So maybe we'll have that one too one day. I got another comment here. So we got Faith Without Works is Dead, which is a comment here. I also have a comment that says, what are some resources for caregivers to help with financial burdens placed on them due to the Alzheimer's diagnosis? I had read that in 2020, there were 11 million unpaid caregivers who are helping their family members right through these kinds of issues. And according, as Dr. Chen said earlier, probably more than that, right? I mean, and so can one of you answer the question about caregivers and the resources that are available to them?
Well, I can say for Chicago, the Department of Aging is a resource that people can reach out to for some insight, some resource information in relation to seniors who have dementia. They do send in caregivers. They give so many hours for paid caregivers and things of that magnitude. So I can say the Department of Aging, Chicago's Department of Aging, and Illinois Department of Aging can assist with some of the financial burdens because it is expensive. It can become very expensive, especially when, once again, if you don't have private insurance or if you're just strictly Medicare, Medicaid. Thank goodness some things are covered under Medicaid and Medicare, but you really need to reach out to, and I will say this as we were talking about politics, you running, sometimes even your local alderman can give you resources and things of that magnitude, and your local senators, because in some cases they do have information that is not necessarily, well aware in the public. So I would say those are some things that you can do to try to identify ways to get some financial assistance.
Sure. Thank you for this. Juliet Bramlett is back for another question. She's got a lot going on, a lot of good questions here. So she says, I have one of these family members in my home. I had the direct discussion. He had shot down the doctor's visits repeatedly. I'm worried about not just him, but myself because I'm getting worn down emotionally. The pandemic, of course, is not helping. However, I will attempt the approach that was just given. Thank you, panelists. Wow. Would either of you like to respond to that?
Well,
good luck.
Dr. Chen,
it's not an easy task.
Right.
Yeah.
It's taxing. It is mentally, emotionally draining and taxing when you are the caregiver, period. Let alone when you have someone with some major cognitive issues where you are their source of everything, right? Especially when we're talking about late stages of dementia, Alzheimer's. So when, they're not necessarily able to walk anymore, right? So you got to feed them, you have to help bathe them, all those things play into it. So it can, once again, when you're talking about the stages of the progression, it changes. So now you are the one, if you don't have a really good support system, and as this Miss Juliet mentioned, if you're the sole caregiver, I mean, you have to get a break. So with that being said, there are places that offer respite, because everyone needs respite, right? Because you will go crazy. So respite is something that is offered at certain facilities. And so depending on, if they have home health coming in or hospice, there are opportunities to just get a break, because we know, once again, if you're worn out and if you start to break down and your health takes a toll, then guess what? That's going to impact everybody. So, that's very valid. I can speak to it once again. It's very, very valid when you are the caregiver.
Yeah.
I think one thing that really goes with the comment is that one of the kind of defining things about Alzheimer's is that the person who has the Alzheimer's really doesn't think there's that much wrong. And that's one of the things that we actually ask, do you think you have a problem? Oh, does your family think you have a problem? And if those things don't match up, that's one of the flags that say, hey, something's going on here. And so just keeping in mind that for them, maybe they know that they're doing a little bit of forgetting, but they don't realize the magnitude of the issues that they have.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the, kind of going to the family disease part of it, when someone's diagnosed, it affects the whole family. It affects everyone around them, and in different ways. And whatever kind of role that particular person was playing within the family, things that they were doing, providing, things that they were carrying. Now someone else has to step in and take that role, as well as now taking care of that person. And that's a lot of work. And I unfortunately see caregivers who are kind of on their own, or just two of them trying to make it work. And it's one of those, you really do need a group of people, need a team to really work and help you out, because it's a lot.
Wow. That's it. I mean, you literally have touched on so many topics and so many issues. This is why the show is called, why it's called The Family Disease. And you really hit that very heavily. When you look at, I teach politics, and so I think about sort of, social movements and things like that. And if you look at what's happened with our culture, that we've, each generation, we're having less children, right? The families are getting smaller, that sort of thing. And so I think about, my grandmother, who, we're taking care of her health needs now. She's in her 80s, but she had 6 kids, right? So she's a lot of people to rotate around.
Yeah.
Well, when I was born in the late 70s, and then now my kids, we're having a lot smaller families. And so I'm sure that there, to your point, is that has an impact on these issues. And I'm not suggesting that you got to have a large family, but I am suggesting that what happens when you're the only child, or when there are just 2 of you, and that's a real issue to consider. So wow. And I also appreciate what was said about just how there's a possibility of the potential patient and the family members, the children, and those sort of folks having a different opinion on this, right? And that must be very difficult, right? I'm picturing the conversation being had with my own children someday, and I hate to say I'm kind of terrified, because we already disagree with them and try to get them to go this way, and they think that, Dad, you're crazy, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about already. And I just imagine that for people who are in that position, they feel so out of control. They've controlled all of this for so long. That has got to be so difficult for them, right? And so, I joke about it a little bit, but my gosh, you guys must do such wonderful work to help bring people to the point where they could even accept what you're giving them, because it does, for many of them, means that they're out of control. And I know that must be very, very difficult.
And there is a grieving process. It's funny you said that. It is a grieving process that happens, because I remember my grandfather, he served in world, I think the Second War, right? World War II.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying, "I'm a soldier. I am a soldier. You cannot tell me what to do." And we're like, okay, well, we're in 2018. We're gonna tell you. But in his mind, he was in control. He lived by himself until he was 95, 96. He always cooked. He drove. He was a usher at the church. It's still in his 90s, and he sat up at McDonald's on the east side with his friends. So when he lost that control, it was very hard. So there was a grieving for him, but it was also a grieving for us as a family, because this was our patriarch, right? And he did everything in his house. So I think as a family, you go through a process where it's acceptance. It's just like any type of death. It's a grieving process. You go through the steps of grief, and acceptance is one of those steps. But it does not necessarily mean it's going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I got to ask you guys. I got couple more questions I'm going to ask in a second as we wrap up. But I want to. I always like to kind of ask a bit of a personal question with my guests on the show, because I think that there's a heart there, and I want to know why you all got into this work. And and if you would just take a few moments to just explain that to me, I'd be very interested in that. Doctor, I was telling you guys about my aunt. And I, obviously, grew up with her, and she used to babysit us. And so we were very close, but she always had a heart for this kind of work from the time that she was a child. My grandmother actually worked at Rush Hospital. And so my aunt went to school with the doctor's kids. And then it just, from the time she was probably 10 or so, just knew this is what she was going to do. But she always had a heart for people in that way. And I just want to know what got you into this work.
I guess I go. So I knew that I wanted to do medicine at a young age. And then in medical school, I realized that I like the whole body. I want to know about all of it and how it works together. I think that was really fascinating, and that got me into internal medicine. And then I kind of found geriatrics by happenstance. One particular time, so in internal medicine, we're in the hospital. We get a whole team of patients, a whole team of us, and we take care of a list of patients. And one of our attendings was just kind of not taking care of a patient. And I was devastated. I was like, there needs, like, this person needs so much work. Like, and they were just like, And I was confused and pretty frustrated, and was kind of asking, was social work, and like, okay, I need a lot of help here. And then I also had another physician that was just doing everything for this really frail old lady, and I was just like, please leave the poor person alone. And I didn't understand at the time. I didn't get it. But I realized that in my training, they didn't really teach us the difference. They didn't, and there's not really this age, like, well, at this age we stop doing this, and at this time we stop doing this. And then, there's not really this like hard and fast rule about how we treat people, and when we treat people, and when do we start worrying about solving a disease and trying to fix them, quote unquote, fix them, versus worrying about their quality of life and how they're doing and how do they feel today, like that kind of thing. And I realized that there's no real teaching about that in the like kind of the general medicine. And so I was curious, well, what do we do, and why and when do we do things for older adults, and how does that change? And then also my desire is to then teach others, because I found out that the one doctor that was kind of shy about doing anything, they were actually afraid. They were afraid of hurting them. And so it was, so I want to be that person that like teaches people, like, okay, this is how you help people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dr. Jamison, thank you for that.
Yeah. So I would say, oh goodness, I knew, and I was a pretty headstrong little kid. So I knew right around first grade where I was going. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to be a registered nurse. So I knew early on that I was going to be able to help people, right? And you're in first grade, second grade, you're saying, okay, I'm going to help people. So I knew right at 6, this is what I was going to do.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't thinking about helping people in first grade. Just for the record.
I knew. I even had a picture for years with this nurse. So I knew at first grade, this is what I was going to be. And then I decided to further my education and become a family nurse practitioner, because I do, as Dr. Chen was saying, I believe in the holistic approach and, just having a different mindset. But it really came home for me when I was in high school. My mother was diagnosed with cancer. And so even though, my dad was there, but my sister was in undergrad at DePaul. And so someone had to be the caregiver. And with me being the baby, it was me. And so I remember being, a young teenager, having to learn how to do some things for my mother, who passed when I was in high school. So it just kind of solidified that, my heart was for people. Obviously, when it's your parent, it's even harder, when you have to take care of your parent as a teenager. But I think that just solidified that this was my calling. I knew I was called to do this, but to do it and have to or choose to really implement this with your mom and family members. At that time, my grandmother had some congenital cardiac issues as well. But I think it just solidified, yes, this was what I was called to do. So I went on and I became a fellow and got my doctorate. And then I began teaching, and gerontology, as Dr. Chen talked about, gerontology was my favorite subject. And I was like, oh my God, I am just loving my seniors. And it just kind of fell into place. And when I got on with Handsome Medical Group, we specialize. And so Dr. Patel, we decided, yes, this was the route to go. And I love it. I could not imagine not doing this.
You know what? I'm so happy that you use the word calling, because I think that what you all do is really a calling, to help people, to serve them in their darkest hours, oftentimes, is not something for folks who don't have a heart and don't have empathy. And you, as Dr. Chen mentioned, you had experience with someone who did not have that empathy, and it was devastating for you. Sure, devastating for the patient, the family, and that sort of thing. And so, you guys are superheroes to me, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I mean it sincerely, because you're so needed in those moments, and all of us are at your mercy when we walk into those spaces, and we hope and pray that when it's our turn, that we get someone as compassionate and competent as you all. And so I just wish you the best in your work. We have a mental health question, but we're kind of out of time here. We had a good conversation. I got to bring Dr. Roberson back in to close us out. But I'm assuming that mental health may have something to do with it based on the context of everything you all said earlier, and maybe Dr. Roberson could touch on that. But thank you all so much. You guys have been phenomenal.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your work, and I wish you the best in what you do. And I do hope that you have many more years of doing this work, and that you'll see some progress in these communities that are suffering heavily. That maybe in 20 years or so, you'll be able to say, yeah, these numbers are going down. And that would be a real victory. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you both so much for all this great information. And I ditto everything that Ted just said. And this topic actually hit so close to home because I'm actually the caregiver of my 85-year-old dad. And I definitely agree with our guest who says that health education is the key and it's definitely needed. And it's no longer just your genome code that actually determines your health status, but it's also your zip code. And the Far South Chicago Coalition prides themselves on education. And that's why we're about 2 weeks away from launching our community much needed program entitled It's a Family Affair, establishing a community based research partnership to develop a culturally tailored, family centered dementia caregiving program. And so now that we know this is an issue in our community, we are seeking 20 to 30 individuals that are caregivers of loved ones with memory loss to participate in this program to help us understand the assets and the needs of families that are actually experiencing this issue. And you can find this information on our website at the Far South Chicago Coalition. Well, that concludes our Friday Health Talk of the Week. This was an excellent show, and I want to give a special thanks to our guests, and I'll definitely have to have them back. So remember, we want to hear from you. If you've been influenced by our show or if you have any comments, please call us, visit our Facebook page, like us, and comment about our Facebook Live, and give us some topics that you'd like to learn more about. This show is sponsored by the Health and Mental Wellness Committee of the Far South Chicago Coalition, which is spearheaded by our president, Dr. Joyce Chapman. This show was directed and the content was produced by myself, Dr. Tonya Roberson, and a job well done by our moderator, Mr. Ted Williams III. We look forward to seeing you all next Friday.